Good morning and welcome to the First Baptist Church of Kimberling City's RPM Daily Devotionals, reaching the lost for Christ, preparing the saints for service, and magnifying the Lord. Now let's join our special guest for today's message.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Lott. I'm one of the life group leaders here at church and asked to do today's devotion. Why would anybody in the first century, in the time of the apostles after Jesus had ascended back to heaven, why would anybody convert to Christianity? Why would they want to be a Christian in that culture? And I'm doing a kind of a research project on that right now in school, and I think we have a little bit of an answer in chapter 5 of the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, and kind of want to go over that today. Paul was on his third missionary journey, and he was kind of meandering down through what we call present-day Greece, Macedonia, and Achaia. And he wrote this letter to Rome, a place that he wanted to go. He had not been there yet, and then eventually on to Spain. And he wanted to kind of get them set up for when he is arrival, because he was looking forward to go there. He was going to go through Jerusalem first to drop off some offerings and then head on over there. But in chapter 5, verse 5, Paul makes this interesting comment. And it kind of seems like a little bit out of place. He says, "And hope does not disappoint." Or hope does not fail, depends upon what your translation says. And I thought that's kind of odd because it seemed a little bit out of place. It said, if he's saying that hope does not disappoint and hope does not fail, then what was failing? What was disappointing the people that he felt it necessary to tell the people over in Rome? Rome at that time was a kind of a melting pot of people from all over the Mediterranean. Different cultures, different religions, just a big melting pot. It was the cultural center of the Mediterranean at that time, and very much like what we would call New York City today. It had multiple religions based upon the different regions people were coming from, but mostly it was a polytheistic society. That means it recognized many gods, and everybody felt like every god that another person respected deserved respect or deserved honor. And it was considered rude if you did not honor somebody else's God. You didn't have to worship them. You just had to respect them or honor them, because to each person, their gods or their deities or whatever they worshiped was considered part of their providence, how they approached life. And it became literally, it's part of their culture. They had big gods over the cities and the regions. They had littler gods over the communities. They even had gods in their homes. We call them lairs. And these gods were supposedly embodying the family members from previous lives that was kind of looking over the family to make sure the family was taken care of. So we had that polytheistic group of people from different regions. And there was a couple monotheistic, single worshiping entities, Judaism, the Jews that we know about. They had Yahweh, and then we had what we call Christians today, the early church movement, which was the letter that the group that Paul was writing to at that time, who was also monotheistic, a single God. So out of this group of people, Paul was addressing this letter. He was addressing this letter to this group of people at church. Most of the transmission of communication back then was not by writing, it was done by word of mouth. So people were talking, and Paul was sending this information. So we look at the Romans. Let's look at the big religions of that region. We look at the Romans. The Romans had this concept of hope in a deity they called Spes, S-P-E-Z. And Spes, this deity, kind of was worshipped through the culture for about 500 years, to just prior to time when Christ was born. At that time, the Roman Republic changed from a republic to a dictatorship. Octavian, Augustine, became the first dictator. And when the first dictator took over, about 27 BC, there and about, the concept of hope went from a deity to the emperor, to the dictator. So the Roman hope now became ingrained in a man and ingrained in the government. And we know that if we place our hope in a man or a government, we know how that goes. That doesn't go too well at all. So we had the Romans, we had the people from the Greek background, even though Greece didn't exist as we know it back then, but from the Greek mythology background. And they had this little demigod, almost like a myth. It wasn't really a god that they worshipped. And this called Elpis, is where the Greek word Elpis means hope. If you recall the story of Pandora, Pandora was a Greek god that let out ills on the world, the trials and tribulations of the world. In the box was this little demigod called hope. It was the hope for man to be able to save them from all these trials and tribulations. And what Pandora did was she closed the box top very quickly so Elpis couldn't get out. So the Greeks didn't have any understanding of hope or any type of future that they could be saved whatsoever from the trials and tribulations of their life. And then we had the Egyptians, which is another large group of people, and they focused on a god called Isis. And Isis was the mother of life for the Egyptians. And Isis was also deemed to be the person that carried the Egyptians over into their afterlife through all the processes they had. And Isis made a decision, would they be transported to what we would call our heaven, to the good side of afterlife versus the bad part of afterlife, based upon the good works or the moral works of the person during their life. In other words, their hope was based upon them living a good life. Then we had the Jews also in that area. Judaism was still very prevalent, a large congregation in Rome. And the Jews originally had a strong covenant relationship with God. Ezekiel kind of came along and kind of changed that attitude a little bit, and he changed it to where they needed to be focused on a future Messiah, what they call the hope of Israel, that the future for Israel existed in a Messiah to the future. And when the temple was destroyed during the Babylonian exile at the beginning of it, God's presence with the people kind of disappeared. They had no more prophets after that, and the Jewish people kind of lost hope. They were constantly looking for the Messiah. And we know that if we look at Luke chapter 24, verse 21, Jesus had just been resurrected, had just resurrected himself. He's walking on this road with these two men. He's speaking to this one guy named Cleopas, something like that. And the guy's wanting, Jesus is asking him, what's going on? What's all this noise about? And he said, have you not heard about this teacher that had just been crucified? And he made an interesting comment. He says, and we had hoped he was the Messiah. And then right after that, Jesus exposed to who he was. He revealed himself to them, and he told them all the truth that the prophets had talked about his coming. But in that statement, we get a picture of what the Jews, they were looking and they were hoping for a Messiah to come to take them out of their oppression. And then the Christians, a very persecuted people during the first century, very, very persecuted. They were considered atheistic, agnostic. I mean, they were absolutely lived in superstition. The polytheistic people just couldn't understand Christians at all. And they were looking for Christ to return. They were looking for the imminent Christ to return because they were under so much oppression and persecution from their surrounding neighbors and people because of the polytheistic culture. They were looking. So we have this group, this melting pot of people that had essentially living in a state of despair. And all of a sudden we have this message of good news, this gospel message that provided them some hope. And no wonder we had people all of a sudden just flocking over, just in the droves, to this message of that there is a future hope. There is something that we can place our faith in. There is some place for us to live into the future. And I kind of look at it that today we have somewhat the same situation coming in. We don't know what the future is going to have for us tomorrow. Look at our society going around us. We obviously, some of us are living in despair. Some of us are disappointed. Some of us are actually in depression because of the current state of our society right now. But if we put our hope in man or government like the Romans did, we don't really have any hope because we surely can't place any hope in our leaders. If we put our faith in our works, we know that God says our works are nothing. They're like filthy rags. We sin. Our works mean nothing. We can't place our faith in that. But we can't be like the Egyptians with our works. We can't be like the Greeks who place our faith in some mythical nothingness. And we can't be like the Jews who are saying that, I have no hope because I don't see it. God doesn't work in our timeline. And if he is slow to respond to something that we think is going to happen, we shouldn't be impatient for that. That's God's timeline. What I'm saying is that today, in our world, hope exists in a person. And that person is Jesus Christ. It's not works. It's not government. It's not myths. It's not our works. It's Jesus Christ. God told us very specifically. He says, if you accept Jesus Christ for what he did for us and his obedience on the cross, then you have peace with me. He said that he's told that to us through Paul in verse 1 of chapter 5. He says, you have peace with me. There's no more conflict with me. And he says, because there's no conflict with me, I am going to fulfill my promises to you. I will not fail you. I will not disappoint you. And that hope I've given to you, I've given it to you in my love because I placed the Holy Spirit in you. So as you're going through this life right now, as we're kind of in a topsy-turvy world, as our pastor told us in the devotion last week, we need to recognize that our hope is not of this world. Our hope really is in a person. It's in Jesus Christ. So when you feel like you're getting down, you're getting a little despair, you're getting a little disappointed, you don't know what the future holds tomorrow, change your focus to the person that where our hope really resides and our future holds for our future. So please, keep your focus on Jesus Christ. May God bless you.
Thank you again for joining us today. We invite you to watch RPM Daily Devotionals each week, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook. For more information on First Baptist Church and its ministries, go to fbckc.com. From First Baptist Church of Kimberling City, have a blessed day.